Hey everyone, welcome back to another video in our 9th edition Tyranid Tactica series. Before we jump into it though, I want to give a huge shout out to our Patreons, Teos and Brian. Your support means the world, and if you want to get involved with some cool rewards on the channel, be featured in Bat Reps as a named model, check out the link in the video description below, or you can click on the little box up in the top right of your screen right now. So in today's video, we're going to be looking at building a Leviathan list, both at the 1500 point and 2000 point levels. So list building has been heavily requested for Tyranids, and I'm really excited to share this video with everyone. However, big disclaimer up front, I know I've mentioned this in other Tactica videos, and that is everyone's local meta tends to be different. You're going to find units that'll work in some areas and others where it just won't. If you're more competitive based, you'll have a harder time using a lot of the units inside the Tyranid Codex, and it'll require you to build a little bit more tighter. So I didn't build my list to be insanely optimized. I built them to work well, and the whole idea of this video is to give you an insight into the thoughts that go into building a list when playing Tyranids. So in this case, obviously, we're talking about Leviathan. So before we jump into it, I just want to give all the points of discussion for this video that we'll be looking at. So we'll quickly talk about Hive Fleet Leviathan, the advantages, disadvantages. I'm going to talk about my mindset when building a Leviathan list. Then we're going to quickly talk about the Kronos patrol detachment. I'll touch on that very, very briefly. There is a video incoming on the that particular detachment. Then we'll talk about the 1500 point list and all the information that goes into building that and my game plan. Then we'll talk about the 2000 point list, so I'll bump the 1500 point up to a 2000, generally keeping the core of the list the same with a few additions and removals. Then we're going to look at my 2000 point competitive list that I've used in a couple tournaments now, well, a variation of one, and then a few of the other battle reports you've seen on the channel will include that. Then I'm going to give a sample deployment with a randomly determined mission. I already have it set up here. It is Scorched Earth from the GT 2020 pack. And then I'll show you kind of where I'll deploy. I'm actually going to be playing against my Necrons in a Tyler vs. Tyler battle report due to current lockdown restrictions in my area, which is fine. It's a great way, again, just to show off the armies. And leading into from this Tactica video into that, I'm really excited to kind of transfer that over and see if all the game plans that I've set out for my list are going to be successful or not. And then at the end, I'm just going to quickly talk about some list building tools and some general advice to help you when it comes to building lists. So let's jump right into it. We're going to zip on over there, take a look at the 1500 point list, and then just talk about Hive Fleet Leviathan before we go over the actual list. Right, everyone. So Hive Fleet Leviathan. In these Tactica videos that focus on list buildings, I'm going to try and keep it focused on the singular Hive Fleet that we're working with, just to give you an idea of the mindset when using this Hive Fleet. Obviously, you can insert other detachments based off your play style with other fleets, but again, the whole goal here is to give you a general overview. With 9th edition, and I just mean Tyranids alone, with like all the different Hive Fleets that came out back in 8th edition. There's so much variety, and there's so many different builds that it's impossible to capture every single one. So again, the essence of this video is to capture each fleet and give you an idea, if you're a newer player, where to start, or maybe if you're an experienced player, open up some discussion. So talking about Hive Fleet Leviathan, the advantages right up front is the most durable build, being that you get the 6-up Feel No Pain when within 6 inches of a Synapse creature, which makes for strong objective secured ability. So you can see right up front, before you even go over the list, I have lots of warriors here, but we'll talk about that shortly. So now the disadvantages with Leviathan. With that 6-up Feel No Pain, while it is very nice, it comes at a cost. You need more Synapse coverage to ensure that you're getting full use out of it, because otherwise, what's the point of bringing the Hive Fleet if you're not going to maximize the advantage it brings to the table? So that in turn, that means more points are being spent on Synapse units, which it does add up. It does lack speed versus some of the other Hive Fleets. There's some stratagems that we'll talk about that can kind of mitigate this, but on a whole, other fleets, and especially 9th edition, speed is clutch, but we'll see what we can do to get around that. So let's talk about my mindset when I'm building this list that we have in front of us. So the big focus when I'm building a Leviathan list is I want strong units that are going to hold objectives and really give my opponent a tough time when trying to take objectives from me, or give me a good opportunistic movement to jump onto an objective and steal it from the opponent with something that isn't just going to get blown off the table right away. I also, when using Leviathan, I really like pushing into the midfield and holding a strong area on the table. So I mean, we'll talk about it in more details, but you can see a couple units there that stand out as holding the mid table. And I also do like Leviathan because it helps negate a little bit of the turn 1 damage that can come in. You see, you have a Malanthrope there that I really like using the Malanthrope to help with turn 1 and overall throughout the whole game. But at turn 1, minimizing the damage depending on the terrain as well. So that's just another nice thing to have. So that's kind of my focus when I'm working using Leviathan. The Hive Fleet there. Very quickly now, we're going to talk about the Kronos Patrol and what that is. So you've probably heard me mention in a few videos. If you're experienced with Tyranids at all, you'll know right away that it is the shooting detachment that goes along with many builds. So it's not cheap, but what you essentially do is you take a cheap HQ, the Neurothrope, for example, a cheap troop, which would be your Rippers, and then you bring heavy shooting units such as Hive Guard and Exocrine is generally what you're going to see in the Kronos build. The power with Kronos, the Hive Fleet power Symbiostorm, gives exploding 6s. So for Hive Guard and Exocrine, that means rolling 6s will generate another hit. That's what exploding 6s referred to. And then the Exocrine, if he stays still, it'll be on 5s that he gets to add another hit, which is very, very nice. So again, to maximize the shooting output, that's what you're bringing. And I mean, Hive Guard alone are incredible. They are usable, obviously, in other fleets, but to maximize the amount of damage output that they're going to do, Kronos Patrol is generally speaking the way to go. But again, we're not focusing on going hyper competitive or super optimized right off the rip. We're going to see if we can make mono fleet builds work. And obviously, adding in the Kronos detachment is just gravy and is really going to help us. But it's up to you to determine if in your area, if it's needed. And yeah, we'll go in more depth about that build in a separate video. But just for anyone who is new and is not sure what I mean when I reference that in these tactic videos, that's what we're talking about. All right, everyone, here is the list that we went with at 1,500 points. So I'm going to just run through the list itself. Then we're going to talk about my mindset when I chose everything, kind of what the core of the list starting out was, and what units I built around and what units were just kind of like the gravy to the overall game plan. So it's just, like I said, a battalion detachment, just Leviathan. In the HQ slot, there's a bit of proxying here. This Tyranid Prime, he just has double sliding talons to minimize the points with him. We have the Malanthrope to help the midfield table presence and also hopefully produce some damage turn 1. The Neurothrope, who has the Resonance Barb Relic, and then with him, it was a toss-up between taking Catalyst, I mean, I'm already getting the Feel No Pain there, or the Onslaught. I did end up taking Onslaught, being that I had these Devil Gaunts. I'm not in Kraken where I can really maximize my speed, so when I do make that advanced roll, I really need to make it count, just in case. Like rolling a 1 or a 2 and not potentially having the CP to spend to make them go further. Then we have 9 Warriors. I kit them out. I like the Bone Swords. I know the Lash Whips are potentially a better option, being that if they take objectives, or if something comes to take an objective from them, even if they're killed, they'll get the fight back. Obviously, kitting them out for full damage, the Prime is somewhat necessary. It's only 75 points. I mean, it's cheap, but he's not doing much more than that on the table. So I have 3 Venom Cannons as well, and they all have Death Spitters. I have my Warriors modeled this way. Eventually, maybe I will get the Lash Whips modeled. Sometimes I proxy, but we're going for what you see, what you get as much as I can. But I just like having the extra attacks because I do kind of play more offensive with the Warriors. And the whole game plan here, the list, as you'll see, is I really want to take the midfield and have these guys push up a flank and take an objective as needed. Then we have 3 Ripper Swarms. A Ripper Swarm of 3. We have 19 Devil Gaunts, that is Devourer Termagants, a unit of 10 Termagants, 6 Zoanthropes with Psychic Scream, a Lictor, and then we have 2 Tyranofexes with the Acid Spray loaded with them. They both have Adrenal Glands just to get a little bit extra movement if I need to advance them. Probably turn 1 I will. And one of them, we're going to say the actual Tyranofex head dude there, has Dermic Symbiosis because I haven't spent any CP. I don't need to take 2 relics. I only have the 1 detachment, so I spent a single CP putting this list at 11 to give him a 5-up invul. Why not, really? So that's the list itself. Now let's talk a little bit about, like I said, what I built around. So generally speaking, I like to try and have my secondaries picked out beforehand. And with Tyranids, I mean, there is some variety you can take, but on a whole, most lists you're bringing are built around deploy scramblers and engage on all fronts. Tyranids like to move, so with that in mind, I always ensure that I have units that will be able to keep me raking those objectives in, and also with deploy scramblers to ensure it's going to go off. So we'll talk about engage on all fronts first, and I'll show you the units that I chose to help me really ensure that that objective is going to go off. So the Rippers are key here. That's literally all they're going to do. Potentially they could steal an objective or tie something up, but really they just want to try and pop up in a corner, ensure that whatever table corner I'm most out of position on, they're going to keep the points coming in for engage. The Lictor also doubles with helping on engage, and also is going to ensure that I get my deploy scrambles off. It's a very small unit in terms of the base, so he's very hard to screen out, especially at the 1500 point level. So between those two, and then just using things like metabolic overdrive to really launch units forward, I could potentially use that with these guys, or anything else. You can actually metabolic and still use your psychic powers too, so you can always do that with the zone throws, which is a great tactic to kind of zip them around and smite at things that you need to. So that's how I'm ensuring engage on all fronts is going off and deploy scramblers. I mean, between all the troops there, like I generally would use these guys to get it in my zone, and then depending on the openings, I would either get the Lictor to do the enemy zone next, and then by that point these guys can do it, or I'd have another unit that would be positioned to do so. That is one thing to think about this list. These guys are very, I mean, I can do it with them, but going all in on them, I need them to be shooting. So often I bring 2 units of Termagants to kind of bounce between them, or if one gets shot off, I still have options to do my scramblers. So the third objective that I would select with this list, well, actually we'll talk about kind of the way I like to play Leviathan, and also how this list is going to work in general. So not knowing the mission obviously up front, or who I'm playing against, I didn't tailor anything like that, or these Tyranid Tactica I think will do well against the Necrons, which I'm obviously I've already said I'm playing against, but just on a whole I just like using this strategy. So what I'm likely going to do, depending on the table, is I send the 2 Tyranid Tacticas up the center, whichever lanes are most open, kind of keep them close to each other and near the Malanthrope, and it's going to make them harder to kill. And if they can get positioned either on an objective or hold down some key lanes, their acid spray can put out a ton of damage. You'd see them used more often, but again, where Salamanders are the most frequent opponent I face, the ignoring AP -1 really does hurt them and negate the damage output with the Tyranid Tactica. So that's the idea. These guys with the Malanthrope are going to be taking the center of the table, or potentially a side flank. It's going to come down to where the opponent deploys their forces, but on a whole, they're just a brick wall that's going to move up and take ground with the Malanthrope in tow to give that 6-up feel no pain plus -1 to hit, which is awesome, and keeps the Malanthrope hidden as well between those 2 guys, because they're big, they're hard to take out, and honestly, if something gets in combat with them, we have the Overwatch potential with that, and nobody wants to get hit with acid spray in combat, so in the next turn, if they don't kill it. So combining that with Pathogenic Slime, it makes these guys pretty decent. I do really enjoy using Tyranid Tactica, especially with Leviathan. So for my third objective, where I'm going to be taking the midfield pretty quickly, these guys having enhanced resistance makes them very durable. I almost would go for Psychic Scream, which is dependent again on what my opponent has. If there's a lot of things that can shut it down, obviously that is a bad choice. But if there's no Psychic at all, being that he's a character, small model, and I have tons of things to screen him with, he can easily get to the middle, start slapping that out, and then boom, he's off to just buff the Zonethropes, who will stay nearby him to get the benefit of re-rolling 1s on psychic powers. So that's kind of the third objective, and also the kind of strategy behind the list that I want to achieve. The other thing to mention too when building this, you want to think about secondaries that you're going to give up. I always try and take less characters and monsters if I can. I mean, there's sometimes a lot of monsters, but if I can, with the Bring Them Down being adjusted back in January, it doesn't give up as much. So like even right here, I only have I guess, sorry, he's a monster too, but anyway, they're giving up, it's 5 points there, and then even for characters, I only have 3, and they're going to be pretty hard to take out, so that's only 9 points there. So those 2 objectives kind of negates that as well. So that's a nice thing with this build, is you're going to kind of shut down the opponent's secondaries in a way, which is pretty nice. Now the one weakness with this list is where we do It is at 1500 points, and like I said, if these guys get killed off quickly, it's going to force me to scramble, having to use these guys or these guys, or hopefully the Lictor can live out up after his arrival. Hopefully he doesn't get screened out. So there is that. On a whole, my secondaries, I'm pretty confident that I can score pretty high with them, with the build with this list. And again, at 1500 points, it is harder to screen out, and it's easier to kind of move around depending on the terrain, and ensure things like engage is scoring high and getting scramblers off. So on a whole, like, I know it's tough because we're looking at this, and again, like, depending on your meta, there's so many things you could say, like, okay, this is going to be weak against this here, this is going to suck here. Then in other people's areas, they'd be looking at this list and be like, oh my goodness, this is insane. So it's tough too, like when you talk about weaknesses. So I'm trying to keep it pretty general. Again, look at it from your own lens in this video and think, okay, would this work? Because there's an individual play style here with a group of friends, something up here. Anyway, you get what I'm trying to say. So I'm trying to help you kickstart your own tactical outlook. So if that all makes sense, I hope everyone enjoys the kind of what I'm trying to achieve here, and I hope it is successful for a lot of you out there. But that is the 1500 point list. We aren't going to be doing deployment with that one. I will be doing it with the 2000 point one. On a whole, it is pretty much the same. I'll quickly run through it. I won't physically deploy them though. But again, looking at the surround and deploy, scorched earth deployment, it is 10 inches up both long sides. I'll turn this so you can see it. So 10 inches up there, 10 inches up there. I think it's essentially called Dawn of War, the old name. 6 objectives in total. So I mean, looking at this, if I won the roll off, I'd probably, it's tough to say. I'd almost take this side because like the terrain effects can park back, and then for things to come around, these are obscuring right here in the middle. Things either have to come that way, or they're going around the long way here. So the terrain effects can park. It shuts a ton of lanes down, keeps objectives nice and tight. Then like over here, I can have units sitting on this side away from stuff. Same with this one. Like if units can get there and then a unit can grab that other objective, they're sitting pretty well. But that's kind of how I would play it. And then I mean, with this being obscuring, I can even send the Devil Gaunts up to the middle, dump shots at whatever's coming in, or even the Warriors come up with the zone tropes, and then I would go for Ritual. Again, looking at this from the perspective of playing against the Necron list that I'll face, I would definitely go for Psychic Ritual. Very confident I could get that one off, no problem, with my characters. Being that chewing through all of these guys or all of these guys is a tough ask with this guy floating in the middle. So there you have it. So that's the 1500 point level. We're going to bump up to 2000 points, and this will be the list that I will play against with my Necrons and see how it fares. And I'll talk about the additions and removals of some of the units going to 2000 points and why I did what I did. All right, everyone, we bumped up to the 2000 point level. So right off the bat, you can see the HQ slot drastically change. Troops got changed slightly, and then heavy support, only one thing was added. So let's take a look and talk about what has changed. Well, we'll talk about the list itself. I'll run through the entire thing very quickly for everyone. So it is 2000 points Leviathan Battalion Detachment. So in the HQ slot, I have 2 winged Hive Tyrants. They're kitted out the exact same, except for this one has Murderous Size and the Resonance Barb. Other than that, they're the same. And then Psychic Powers as well. He has Catalyst and Onslaught. He has Psychic Scream and Paroxysm. They both have a single. They have 2 twin. Or I always say Twin Link Devours. That's the old name. Devours with Brain Leech Worms. They have 2 of those. So getting 12 shots, and when I say 2, that just means like the 1 arm slot. There's 2 in total because they have 6 shots each. Just for any confusion or if anyone wants to mention that. Then they have a set of Monsters Running Claws. And then the wings, obviously, I think I already said that very clearly. They have the wings. And no, I didn't have the points for Adrenal Glands. Right, I adjusted that. Then I have Swarmlord, who will be the Warlord. He swapped his trait out for Adaptive Physiology, which is given there. He has Catalyst and Onslaught. It kind of went for a little bit of redundancy between the Tyrants just for powers. It's just, I mean, when you get a few Psychers like this, it kind of, I mean, it's, you have to get redundant. There's only so many powers you can do. Moving along into the troop slot, we got our 9 warriors kitted out the exact same as before with enhanced resistance, so spending 1 CP to get the extra adaptive physiology. That's the only extra CP spent in the list, putting us at a total of 11 CP. 3 rippers. Then instead of the Devil Gaunts, we have 3 units of 10 Termagants. We'll talk about that in a second. Zoanthropes remain the same, 6 of them with Psychic Scream, Lictor. The Tyranid are here as well. Only one of them has Adrenal Glands, which we'll say will be the actual Tyranid head guy. Didn't have the points to get him on both. And then an Exocrine. So let's talk about the differences, starting with the HQ slot. So obviously, big overhaul there, big swap out. I find at the 1500 point level, it's either I can spend the points on the heavier HQ such as this, or I can spend the points and get like the more like heavy hitter monsters, so kind of the flip side. And I found at the 1500 point level, at least with Leviathan, in the matches I've played, not having a Tyrant or Swarm Lord, it hasn't done me wrong. I've done well with my list that I built at that point level using like a Tyranid Primer, a Malanthrope. So I didn't feel it was necessary, but bumping up to 2000 points, just the damage output and harassment ability with the Tyrants is incredible. If you haven't watched the Tyranid Tactica video on Hive Tyrants, just came out last week, the week before this video. It gives a great insight on how you can play your Tyrants. I prefer to use mine sometimes aggressively as needed, but on a whole as a supportive Psychic Gunboat harassment unit. They're great for just kind of floating around with Leviathan. The durability goes up with them having that feel no pain, and also a little bit of screening, clearing. I don't have the Devil Gaunts now. They can get those extra 12 shots each to hopefully chip away at something or kill off maybe a small MSU unit on an objective. So that's why I went with them. Then the Swarmer, obviously, his role in this list is to slingshot the Hive Tyrants or potentially the A Tyranid for positioning. In terms of objectives, I kept them the exact same for when planning how to build the list. So deploy Scramblers, engage on all fronts. I'll talk a little bit about engage on all fronts and deploy Scramblers in relation to these guys in a second. However, with Swarmlord, again, I would go for Ritual as my third one, or use a mission specific, or just build it off what my opponent has. So I have my first 2 objectives, again, set in stone, more or less, and then the third one will kind of be based off of what I'm facing. If there's nothing that can shut Swarmlord down, I think I definitely would go for Psychic Ritual. There's enough units to kind of go in front of him, keep him screened, and with his double move ability, he can even use it for himself. I know it's 270 points, but that's 15 victory points, so big difference maker there. So those are the options with Swarmy. He's either going to be launching one of these guys around, or potentially himself, or these guys if it's really needed for positioning. Warriors, their goal remains the same. They're just going to charge forward and get into the midfield and hold an objective, or depending on if I don't have first turn, react and push onto an objective that I really want, a flank I really want to secure very easily. And the Tyrants can really support in that relation, help clear an area, and then the Warriors can stay behind and do some shooting. So I don't think I mentioned with the 1500 point, obviously not having Hive Guard in this particular list or in the other one. The double shoot strat would be used by these guys, obviously in this one. On the last one, the Devil Gaunts more or less would take the cake for that one, depending on the targets that I'm shooting at and the positioning of everything too. So that's worth mentioning that these guys will obviously be using that, and so I do want them to be in a spot where they can shoot. I mean, the Venom Cannons, it's not a guarantee, but it's some pot shots, and it's great at clearing out like lighter screening units as needed. Moving into the troop section, the Ripper goal remains the exact same as before, so I won't mention them in great detail. But now that I have 3 units of these guys, at 2,000 points, I like spreading out and taking more of the table, being that there's obviously more on the other side of the table to kill what I have. So by having these guys, it's going to give me extra bodies to, again, push forward for engage on all fronts, taking advantage of metabolic overdrive if needed. Being that that's one thing with that stratagem too, is that you can use that stratagem and move twice and not advance, because it gives you the option. It's as if you're moving as if it was a movement phase, you can advance if you wish. It specifically states that you don't have to, which is great because they can move twice and then drop scramblers into the enemy deployment zone depending on what happens. If something gets screened out, say it's a lictor, or they just want to zip forward and take care of the neutral zone right away. So just something to consider, and that's kind of why I like having the extra bodies. And again, being Leviathan, with the Tyrants moving forward and all over the place, it'll help coverage with them too, or if there's one kind of floating nearby the Warriors, depending on placement of objectives. Then we have the 6 Zoanthropes. Their role remains the same. They obviously lose the buff from the Neurothrope, but in my experience and Leviathan lists with Zoanthropes, they are just so stinking durable and annoying to deal with. And with so many other things that could be flying forward or taking middle ground quite quick, I find they don't get targeted as often, and when they do, they just absorb so much firepower that in the end, the other things that should be getting shot are staying alive and doing the damage that's needed. Lictor obviously is doing his thing, nothing changing at all with him. And then we have the Tyranid and the Exocrine. So quickly talking about the Tyranid, their goal remains the same as before. They obviously don't have the Malmthrope to assist with them, but we have more things that can kind of float nearby and kind of keep them alive. So Swarmlight can stay near them and offer some backup support if anything does get close to them and wipe them out. I mean, that's obviously a big threat if something's popping in and just wiping these guys out in one round of combat, which is very likely depending on who you're playing. Very likely that could happen, I should say, depending on who you're playing. So it's nice to have Swarmlord nearby to do that. And also the ability to kind of heroically intervening him, depending again on terrain and where these two are going. So, but overall, their role remains the same. Exocrine. Now, I took him because I wanted a little extra shooting output for higher damage, being that I lost the Devil Gaunts and just a ton of shots can dump, even on stronger things, just volume of fire again with double tapping. I brought the Exocrine just because it does work. It does obviously excel, like I mentioned much earlier in the video with the Kronos detachment, the patrol one. It excels when it's with that, but being that we're not using it, I took him because he still has his place. He still can do the damage. And again, with other targets flying forward, I would play him not as aggressively as I would in other lists, being that he does not have Dermic Symbiosis. So I'd be a little bit more hesitant to just launch him out. But again, I mean, if there's obviously something that he needs to do or a prime target right away, he can zip out and do his job. That's a 2,000 point list on a whole. Again, talking about weaknesses, it's hard to say like every single little weakness. I'm not going to go through and list every single one against all the different armies, but right up front, in terms of like talking about objectives, we'll say weaknesses and losing points. I think this list does well on objectives. It does, however, give up, bring them down a little bit, because I mean there's 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12 on the table. With that, what's it called? The Aboard the Witch. That one is another one that there is a fair amount of points on the tables. Combining that with Assassinate, I mean, it's 9 points for Assassinate, then it's what is it? I think 9 for Aboard the Witch as well. So I mean, like, it's not. It gives up points, but it's not points that you're going to maximize on, which is nice as well. So that's something else to think about. I guess, I mean, they're there too with Aboard the Witch, but even still, that's only what is it? 11 points or 10, whatever it is. So it's still not maxing out. But yeah, so that's kind of like the things that this list is built around, preventing the opponent scoring high on. In terms of weaknesses, I mean, it really, like, it doesn't have the best, like, if stuff can get in into melee, like these guys they should be okay, and these guys are pretty decent, but like these guys, if the troops get cleared out, that's going to really negate the ability for scoring points, because again, these guys want to be more centrally located, ideally, and these guys are going to be the ones stealing me points, because I think we're going to score well on secondaries, but being negated primaries is what's going to hurt this list. So the weakness here would be losing our troops and then having to react and try and score primaries. I mean, the Tyrants are there to zip around, but these guys are OBSEC, and really relying on them to help with engaging on all fronts too. But there you have it. So I am going to go through sample deployment with this group right here. And kind of take a look at the mission. We are, like I said earlier, we're going to be using Scorched Earth from the GT 2020 pack. We'll go over the sample deployment, and then after that is all done, we're going to take a look at my competitive list that I've used in previous battle reports and talk about that. That is my Leviathan and Kronos one. Just kind of show you. That's one thing too I didn't mention earlier in the video. I know things like I really wanted to bring the Barbed Hierodule or Dimicaran, but I know not everyone has that. So I tried to keep it more generalized to models that most people likely should have or could have, versus units that are a bit more pricier and not the average person is going to have them. I mean, I only am just getting, I mean, I've been playing Tyranids since 2012, so a fair amount of time with Tyranids under my belt, and I'm just getting into Forge World stuff, obviously, where they got revamped and are quite good, but I mean, even still, it's a big investment, so very understandable. But anyway, let's jump into the sample deployment, and we'll take a look and see how everything looks. All right, everyone, here is the table that we'll be doing the deployment on. The mission is Scorched Earth. There are a total of 6 objectives. One here, 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 and here. So the Necron list that I'm playing against, I'll just very quickly go through it. So there's 2 Satan Shards, a Nightbringer Deceiver, 2 blobs of 20 Warriors, 6 Scorpic Destroyers, a Lord with a, sorry, I think a Warden it is, and then I think 6 Scarab Swarms, 6 or 3 Scarab Swarms, and then 3 Canoptic Spiders with the thing that shoots the Twin Particle Beam. I think that's what it's called. So tons of shots, 36 shots from the unit of 3. So that is what I'm up against. So looking at the deployment, obviously knowing what I'm up against, I think I would go for Psychic Ritual. I know it is risky with the Nightbringer and stuff coming up the middle, but with my psychic abilities and shooting, then like into combat, surviving, and where I have units that have invols in combat, just making these a little tighter. That is the center as well. I'll talk about that in a second. I'm pretty confident that I could survive in there. And again, with Swarmlord being able to move himself in and slingshot back and be screened by things, he should be able to just kind of sit there and easily take care of that objective. So I feel very confident that I'll be able to get that 15 points. And if there's other units like Warriors and stuff coming through there, positioning the Tranafexes like on this side, I'll be able to really shut them down and stop them from coming through and putting any hurt or getting near my Swarmlord or other key targets. So looking at the table, let's talk about what side we pick. So I know we're going for Engage, Deploy Scramblers, and Ritual. Like I just mentioned, the center of the table is right on here. Talking about the table as well, this is obscuring through here. You can't pass through it. Obscuring, this is just area terrain, not obscuring. So being in it though, gives infantry the cover save. These are obscuring. Ritual is just runes. That makes it easier to say. This is simply just true line of sight blocking. There's no area terrain involved in there. There's just a little hole that things can go in. And it's not breachable either. So you actually have to go around into it. So big, tall steel concrete thing. And then these obviously just, like I said, blocking. And this is obscuring, but that's it, not breachable. So solid wall. Now, if I got to choose my deployment, let's look at the table here and let's talk about what sides and the advantages and disadvantages going for the objectives of what we have. So choosing this side, obviously I camp up very centrally here. Going over this way, like I can kind of really protect myself from a lot of shots coming through, being that this is obscuring and this is obscuring here. It is 10 inches up, which I believe is just right up against this wall like that. And then even over here, there is a pocket that you're completely zoned out with too. It looks very open and looks like, okay. But if you get down here, there is a zone too that you can kind of sit down and see that things can sit here and stay covered. I mean, stuff can come through here and shoot you, but anything coming into the middle is risky. Again, shouldn't have set the train effects. So in terms of turn 1 safety, I feel pretty good about this side. On a whole though, I think I'd like to go for the other one, because the only thing with this now is for lanes, there's a choke point right here. Putting the train effects up through here, you'd have to get a good advance roll to get them through and then fit the other one through, or even have Swarmlord come through first, or you'd have to send Swarmlord first, and then hopefully everything else can get around it and ensure that he'll be safe. So I don't think this side would be the one, just simply because of that choke point. And even over here, it's a tight movement space to go through, very small funnels for different models to move through. So on the flip side now, over on this end, let's take a look and see what it looks like. This is also -1 to shoot through. Obviously, I don't think that's really going to come into play too much. However, the Necrons do have that Veil of Darkness, which is something to consider. Excuse me. So on this side, deployment I think is like almost just right up to there, like so. Obviously, I didn't mention it. The Lictors and Rippers are going to be coming up. I don't think I'd spend a CP for anything to go into the strategic reserve. I'd like everything on the table to make the shots off turn 1 and get that advantage. I feel looking at this table, there's enough area that I can hide behind and stay covered with Synapse. So there's no issues there at all. And being that I have 11 CP, I am at no worries moving the Exotrine and spending that CP to keep him still if needed. So on this table, there's tons of area right here that I can stay protected with all my monsters. Tyrants can sit right up on top of here. I know they're not as far forward. However, this is all obscuring. They can sit here side by side, not block up space for my other units there. The big advantage I see right away for myself is this zone right here with the terrain effects. Like I said, the game plan with them is to get into the middle and shut the lanes down hard. But there's so much space here too that even getting one position over, they still have line of sight down through here, and they're not going to have a huge choke point for preventing Swarm Lord from coming around this way. I know all of my other infantry units can just go through, but again, like, it depends on where everything else is deployed. So definitely for that point alone, I would pick this side, but then like we'll finish talking about everything in terms of objectives as well. I feel very confident I can hold this objective without being contested. Stuff would really have to get through and get close to me to get it, which I'm pretty confident I'd be all right against. If stuff is getting in through here, it's not looking for me. Good for me to begin with. I know Veil of Darkness is something to consider. However, screening abilities and having those 3 Termagants is something I will keep in play. Then there's this objective, which is, this would probably be the one objective that I wouldn't really get to, or it might be a late game one with my Termagants. That's something I would send the Termagants over towards. I think, potentially even the Warriors. That may be a spot that I would send the Warriors to, depending on where everything else is over here. Sending the Warriors over this way would allow me to have still some good, solid shooting lanes. They're protected over here if needed, and they can push onto this objective. So the Warriors may be in contention for that, depending on where the Necrons deploy. Then over on this side, the Termagants, ideally, like, this looks like a very open objective. However, I do like the spot of it. There is a pocket right here that Termagants can get up and against and kind of hold right along the line here, and hold that objective and not be seen nearly as much. I know things can come through here, but again, the idea of the terrain effects is I want to get them positioned with one here, one positioned at this spot. We'll just show you for completion's sake. I know too, this depends on where the Necrons are going, but in a perfect world, this is how I would like these guys to be set up. Positioned both somewhat like that. That way this guy can also see down this way. He can see there. They both can cover both lanes, and that is a lot of acid spray shots coming through, and keeping one another protected too. And then being even over this way, if something is going to charge him with his buddy beside them, they'll have to funnel in this way unless they want to charge both, which I'm perfectly okay with, because again, if these guys aren't killed in combat, that's a lot of guaranteed acid spray shots, double shooting coming in. So risky business there. Yeah, and then even with the Exocrine too, like, it's positioning him, you can even stick him right here. He's got a solid line right down the middle, so anything that comes through this area is going to get cooked. He is a pretty high model, and sitting here, he'll have that side covered. So I feel very confident that this side of the board of my shooting units can be dominated. My speed over here, especially again over Necrons, with a metabolic overdrive, I can quickly take there. So the whole goal with this game is to take the table fast and hard, and then lock down lanes, and just, I know Necrons are tough. I was going to say attrition, but just kind of take advantage of movement, and that'll be the edge. We're both pretty solid forces, with Leviathan having that 6 up, and Necrons obviously having their 5 up across the board. But yeah, so not a lot we can do about that, but hopefully just win it out and use our speed to our advantage. So talking about deployment, that's pretty much it. Like, I'm not going to actually physically deploy every single model because it is very situational. I don't have the Necrons all laid out. However, the battle report will be filmed, so eventually there will be a link here. So if you're watching this video down the road, there'll be a link to that battle report, or just stay tuned for the battle report to pop up next week. But that is essentially how I would deploy everything onto the table. I think that pretty much sums it up. Oh, the one other unit that I didn't really mention was the Zoanthropes. They would kind of be my damage control unit. It is very nice, again, having this. I enjoy when tables have obscuring terrain in the center in terms for my Zoanthropes, just positioning wise if they can. I would likely set them up into the middle here. It's like having at least one over on this end, one pointed over this way, because you choose which Zoanthrop casts the smite power, right? With this being obscuring and it's visible, so you can kind of pick between, is there a key target coming over here, or is it just something I want to hit, or is there something over here that I can kind of have them this way? So it's like kind of a double threat that forces the opponent, the Necrons in this case, to kind of think about screening on both ends, like if they don't want something getting slapped by Super Smite followed by Psychic Scream as well. So that's the other thing to kind of think. And what I quickly mentioned too about the Psychic Ritual in terms of Swarmlord being able to double move, because that was a tactic I talked about earlier. I took a look at the middle and both moving from here, like doing his onslaught, Hive Commander to move himself back versus that side. In the end, he could make it right here, and then even getting a 1 with the advance roll will put him more or less behind. Like, I mean, if there's something right there, it'll be able to see him. but everything else would be protected. Same for that end. He'll be able to move back and hide behind there. Now again, the one thing is the choke point as well. I really want to emphasize that. Being on this side, if I have any of my terrain effects is there, or if they're like already coming up, there's a lot of risk in that. So that's something you want to think about with your secondaries. Like, I know it's very specific with this one, but think about those choke points in your games. What are things on the table that your opponent has that's really going to affect your particular secondaries and things like that? Like, obviously, if I was playing against someone that could deny power, like Thousand Suns or Grey Knights even, or even Dark Angels, so just being able to deny my ritual going off. So things like that obviously is a choke point, but just stuff like that. And then there's like the physical moving. You get what I'm saying. But anyway, that's pretty much it with deployment. I think it really covers everything in detail. Again, like, not gonna physically set up every little model here. You'll see the battle report soon. And yeah, and that just kind of gives you a walkthrough through all the kind of what ifs. I know I was talking about Necrons in specific here, but on a whole, I think it really gives an insight onto how you deploy against other armies as well. All right, so here's the competitive list that I've used at a tournament as well as on the channel a couple times now. The list has evolved slightly, and I'll mention that at the end. It's a photo here of the list I use, just easier than pulling all the models out, especially where I'm going to be doing a battle report with the 2,000 point list that you saw earlier. So like I said previously in the video, it is a combination of Leviathan and that Kronos patrol detachment, which you can see on the right hand of the screen. So walking through the list, it's 2,000 points. Leviathan battalion, we have a flying Hive Tyrant with monster shredding claws, murderous size, adrenal glands. He has he did have the resonance barb in this particular build, but I ended up switching that over to the Neurothrope as I felt it was better for getting Symbio Storm off and ensuring that goes off. And obviously wings, and he had Catalyst and Psychic Scream for his powers. Then we had Swarm Lord, who had Onslaught and Catalyst as well. I just kind of like the redundancy. In this version of the list, I had a Neurothrope in the Leviathan side just to assist the zone thropes, and also I was planning on potentially using it for Psychic Ritual depending on what I came up against. In the end, the Neurothrope ended up getting cut from the list, as well as the Biovores on the right, in place for, and also a unit of Termagants, which allowed me to add in a Barbed Hero Duel. So that's kind of the evolution with that list. I think there was one game against Imperial Guard. Yes, against Guard, using that version of the list. So actually, no, there's two against Imperial Guard and Space Wolves. So you can check those out on the channel. But again, continuing on with what I have here, we had 6 Zone Thropes with Psychic Scream, 2 units of Bare Bones Warriors with Double Sliding Talons, and that's it. And then we have 2 units of 10 Termagants. And then onto the Kronos Patrol, we have a Neurothrope with Symbio Storm, and like I said, he got Resonance Barb put over to him in all iterations of the list after this one. This was right after the tournament I competed in back in March of this year. A Lictor, 5 Hive Guard. At the time, like I said, there was 3 Biovores. I use those for move blocking. It's something I'm going to potentially do a Tactica video on as well. It's a fun tactic. It's hilarious when it works, and it's a way to get them on the table and get some use out of them. The Exocrine with, he had Dermic Symbiosis on him. I spent the CP to give him the 5 up. The other guy that had a adaptation was the Tyrant. He had Murderous Size. I don't know if I mentioned that. And the Dimmicaran. I don't even know if I said that. On the Leviathan side, like I said previously, not everyone has Forge World models. I know the updated version of this list also has the Barbed Hero Duel, so I know not everyone has Forge World units, which is why I left them out over the core portion of this video. Yeah, so that is the list. Like I said, it performs pretty much in a similar manner as I've described Leviathan to you with the other list that we've seen with the core of the force, just holding objectives and really taking advantage of that 6-up. It came in really handy in the tournament I played. I had one unit of the Gaunts. I know you can't always bank on it, but I had a unit of 10 Termagants. I think they took grand total of something like 40 or 50 bolter shots, and just with that 6-up, it was just like it kept keeping them around. Like it was phenomenal. It's just the fact, like, when it works, like it can make a difference. So, and then the Warriors too, they just, with that 6-up, like, they just were smaller, they were easier to hide, and it was a pain to kill them. Even though there was 3, it was just a little bit of having that 6-up plus being Synapse. It was nice. Zoanthropes did work in the list that I found. They floated forward with all the other targets like the Dimicaran, Exocrine, Hive Tyrant. The Zoanthropes never got focused down on and just did a ton of mortal wounds where needed. I tend to try to position them towards the tougher targets, chip them away slowly, or weaken them up, and then Dimicaran can go in like a blender. And then obviously the Kronos patrol, we'll do a full video on that, but the Hive Guard sat back with the Neurothrope and Exocrine who would move out and just dump shots in, and Rippers and Lictor popped up doing the exact same thing as described in the other ones. But very quickly, that's what more of a competitive optimized version of Leviathan can look like when combined with the Hive Fleet such as Kronos. But again, in this video, we're not going for super competitive, super optimized. We're trying to go very general, just give insights that go behind the list building and help you gain some knowledge or open discussion, like I said, with other experienced players, because I am no professional myself at all, but always looking to learn and just help grow the Hive mind. Last little thing I do want to mention before we end the video is talking about list building tools and some advice with that. I highly recommend finding a tool that works for you. I know there's all kinds of free apps out there. Personally, I use Battlescribe. This is no way a sponsored or advocate push to use that particular application, but it works for me. I do have the Warhammer 40k app as well. It does have its issues, but on the whole, I do really enjoy the app. I know it costs as well. But for those of you that are looking to invest in something, it definitely could be worth it. But find a tool that helps build lists. It's going to take pressure off writing it down the old school way and help newer players kind of get into building lists quick and fast. And kind of it allows you to swap options in and out too, which is another feature. And that's one of the biggest pieces of advice that I want to have is being able to real time see the difference between like pulling this guy out, adding this guy. You can very quickly see how points can get tight, and then building other lists, you'll have an idea of like, okay, very quickly, like if I bring these two guys, that's like that is a quarter of the list taken up, you know what I mean? Stuff like that. It'll just help speed things up and also give you an idea of kind of like what percentage are units taking up, and then you can think about that on the table as well. Like like let's just like these guys, they're taking other 210 points, I think it is, each. So essentially just a quarter of the list. And then let's just say like they're doing absolutely nothing, not bringing in points, and you can really think like that's a quarter of my points taken up with not much in return. So just a little bit of advice to kind of think about. I know it's not specific to obviously the Leviathan here, but on a whole, I'm going to mention this in all the list building videos. So that's pretty much it. I really hope you all enjoyed watching this. Please leave a comment below for whatever video you want to see next in the Tyranid Tactica series. Definitely will cover more of the Hive Fleets, in particular Behemoth, Kraken. We'll talk about the Kronos Patrol. I don't really bring full Kronos. Those are the main ones I use and have most experience with, so I'm going to experiment with the other fleets, get more time under my belt before I do a video on them. But that's it. If you want to get involved with us and join our community, you can check out our Patreon page. There's all kinds of really awesome rewards that have been created for you to feel involved and get involved in the battle reports even, or just get chatting with the community and the gamers that are featured on the channel. Thanks for watching. Stay tuned for lots more content coming your way, and appreciate your support so much. Every like and the subscribes means a lot. Take care. Have a good day.